Hello, everyone. I'm Colin Testa of WrestleZone.com, joined by Dango, formerly known as Fandango of WWE fame. Dango, how you doing today?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for
The
taking the
art,
time.
the
Really
artist,
appreciate
the
it.
artist formerly known as Fandango.
Yes, yes. And speaking of which, I guess we might as well start off there. I mean, I know I myself watched you rise to real fame in WWE as Fandango, and I think, of course, it's fair to say that you enjoyed a lot of success there. And then, of course, that run in WWE may not have ended the way that anybody would have hoped. But now here we are, a couple months removed from that, and I guess I just want to ask, with that kind of time to reflect and because it's not like it's the day after the release happened, where how do you look back? I guess I'll take it generally. How do you look back on your time in WWE, kind of all encompassing? And then I guess now, as you enter this next chapter of your career, what are you most excited about, and just kind of do your general thoughts on it?
I'm grateful, bro. I mean, a lot of my friends got released and let go during COVID of April of 2020. So for me to get another year working with Triple H and Sean and everybody down at NXT, getting a full year of, I guess not quite doing just comedy matches like Breeze and I were doing on SmackDown for a couple of years. So, he challenged us down there, Hunter, and we had a good year. We won the tag team titles, which was great. And, I kind of proved to myself and proved to, the fans that that we weren't just a comedy act, that we could go in the ring. So I mean, everyone gets released eventually, so it's what you do with your money when while you're making it. And yeah, I had 14 years of WWE, so you can't really be that upset about it. You can't change the past, and I'm blessed, man. I'm blessed to have a 14-year run, and and luckily I got that last year, and where we get to kind of do. I was really proud of that last year, doing some good matches with Breeze.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think I would definitely agree that as someone, again, I watched you back in your, dancing Fandango days, and when you're facing Chris Jericho, and then definitely just a big leap from the work we saw in NXT, where it wasn't comedy, it wasn't about even the gimmick, it was about the fact that you two could really wrestle, put on these very good matches. So I myself, I know many others enjoyed getting to see you in that light as well. So I guess basically, what was your, I guess maybe beyond that aspect specifically, what were maybe your favorite parts about being in NXT kind of compared to the main roster? Because I would imagine there are definitely different animals in that sense, where it's definitely a different style, different work altogether.
That's a good question. So Dusty always talked about your body of work throughout your career. So it's kind of like the analogy of being an actor, where Breeze and I were kind of in that. We were in that comedy role, which we did well. That's why they kept us doing it, and we did the Fashion Files, and everything has a shelf life. So you can only do one shtick for so long that it's eventually like, all right, we get it, and you kind of have to evolve and keep moving forward. So obviously the comedy kind of had its, ran its course. So when we get to go down to NXT, not down to NXT, I shouldn't say, when we went to NXT, it was kind of time to challenge ourselves and put in some ring time. So I guess going back to your question, is having 2 or 3 minute comedy matches on Raw or SmackDown, now doing 15, 20-minute tag team title matches for an old timer like myself, who's about to be 40 in a couple of years. I mean, it's kind of like, you got to challenge yourself and get your cardio up, and there's good, the top level, performers, guys and girls in NXT, the Roderick Strongs and the Bobby Fishes and the Kyle O'Reillys, and just the best wrestlers in the world. So we went from doing comedy matches, 2 or 3 minute dance offs or whatever. Now you're wrestling the elite of the elite. No pun intended. But so yeah, it was challenging for us, and it was challenging for me. And I thank God that I had Breeze there to keep it going for me, to call my spots for me. So
I feel like I'd be remiss to ask. I mean, I know that you and Breeze, I believe, were released in June, and of course, NXT continued or I should say, WWE continued to kind of make these mass releases here, with another round kind of happening very early August, and then of course after that, all this news about, and then we saw the launch of the NXT revamp just this past week. Definitely a very different NXT from one that you and I were just talking about, where like when you were there, it was really about wrestling the elite of the elite, and there's still, that's still the case, but it is in this very different presentation. It's a very different vibe, intentionally so. So it's maybe in a general sense, what do you think about all the changes, both from a personnel aspect and also from a presentational aspect, because it is a very different looking NXT?
Yeah, well, obviously there's two different visions of it, I guess. I guess maybe the other vision, the older vision, that when Breeze and I were there, was a third television show, maybe with higher, tenured, longer veterans in the business that have been wrestling for quite some time. But maybe there's another, maybe there's another entity in the WWE higher ups that think that maybe this should be more of a developmental FCW type of system, which I can understand. So just by seeing the product over the last, they've done one new show, right, at 2.0.
Yeah.
It reminds me of an FCW where you're mixing in newer guys and girls with some older veterans. So I can kind of see where they're going with it, a little bit more colorful. I think it's a good thing. I mean, they're going to use it, I think, more as a developmental television show to get the guys and girls more acclimated to TV. It's the thing. It's a business of perception, man. So I mean, there's a group of guys in the office that see it as one thing, and then there's another group that maybe see it as a different thing. So as long as the guys and girls are getting reps and getting acclimated for Raw or SmackDown, I think it's a good thing. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I do want to ask you, touch on the SCW comparisons. A lot of people, myself included, picked up on a very similar connection there. And while you definitely at least were in the early version of NXT where it wasn't quite FCW, but it was much more of that developmental side. And then, as we were just talking about a minute ago, you were also on the other side of the spectrum where it was, that third TV show, more of a standalone brand in that sense. Just, I don't know. Do you think that there's real, which one do you think see is working as maybe a better TV show? Where, because to me the developmental is very different.
There's 150 TV shows right now if I turn on my TV, and there's different wrestling shows. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the old NXT is better than the new NXT or vice versa. It's just different. It's just a different version of it. So the NXT season 4 that myself and Brodus Clay and EC3 and a couple other, a few other guys, Byron Saxon, we were on, was more of for lack of a better term, young boy, greenhorn trying to pay their dues, and we're going to put them in awkward situations, cut promos on the fly, and kind of they knew we could wrestle, but like, what kind of personalities do these talents have? You can teach someone how to take a hip toss or give a hip toss, but what can they do on the fly in terms of their personality and charisma? So I think if you take anybody now on the main roster and put them in that situation, in those scenarios, it's uncomfortable.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Cut a promo, go run around the ring with a keg, So that's interesting TV. But then on the other hand, going back to your question, now you have a show in 2020, 2021 with a bunch of seasoned, independent veterans like Roderick Strong, and in the best of the best elite wrestling. It's a good wrestling show, and that's interesting too. So it's just different versions. So I think the 2.0 is kind of a mix of both. You still have the elite wrestlers with the newer guys, Steiner's son, which everyone was talking about him online, and so you're kind of mixing the up and comers with the older veterans, which you need. You can't have a full show of just green guys, because they need to work with the Roddies and the experienced guys, and that's how they're going to get better. When I was coming up doing dark matches, you would work the Regals and the Fitz and the Nobles, and that's how you get better, is working people that are better than you. So I think it's a good thing what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of fairness in that as well. It is a very good mixture, and I definitely do want to touch on you run on the main roster, and maybe even just kind of, for me at least, the beginning of your NXT run, because I think at least in some ways, one perhaps obstacle you face on your main roster career is that, I mean, I know you dealt with some injuries that kind of derailed things here and there. I remember, I think you had returned to, even when your NXT run began, you had dealt with an injury, and that kind of delayed things somewhat. Maybe things would turn out a little differently, at least in terms of what you and Breeze were able to do in NXT. But do you feel like that's something that, kind of maybe set things back, or like, how do you kind of look back on it now that that chapter is closed? Where, how do you think injuries ultimately played a role in your run on the main roster, or and then on NXT as well, I should say?
Definitely getting the injury on the main roster in 2013, where I got a concussion. I think wrestling the Great Khali, and that definitely derailed me. I think I was going to wrestle for the Intercontinental title. I can't remember who was the champ at the time, maybe Cody or Wade Barrett, but that definitely derailed me. But I mean, the injury, I tore my UCL in a tag match in December of 2020. I mean, it didn't derail us that much because COVID ended up hitting a couple months later, and just wrestling in general was kind of weird and wonky for a few months. But then when I got cleared, I said, hey, I'll drive down to Orlando if you guys want me to, because no one was flying. And they're like, yeah, I'll come back. So to me, I don't know, like, if you don't go away, people don't miss you. So you can be the best talent in the world, but if you're on 20 minutes of TV segment every week, it's like, all right. So sometimes going away, I'm not saying injuries are good, but like, you remember Triple H coming back from his injury. You remember Cena coming out, the Rumble, I think it was. You remember those things because sometimes you need to go away for a little while just for people to miss you. And
Absolutely.
I think that, I think that sometimes we oversaturate. When something's good, we just push it down people's throat, and we oversaturate it. It's going well, so keep putting it on TV. But in like a bittersweet kind of way, if you can get an injury as a performer and just as a human being, man, you can kind of reset your mind, and you kind of step away, and you can kind of get out of the grind of just traveling every week, and step back and kind of reevaluate your character and where you're at. So sometimes injuries are not the end of the world.
No, I could definitely see how it's a case of like absence makes the heart grow fonder. And then you mentioned the benefits as a performer, but then as you're just saying, for fans, it's like people miss you when you're gone, so then you come back, and it like builds even more excitement. It's like that because then you weren't there, and then you were there again. So I definitely see that. And now we've been talking a lot about the past and such, and I do want to talk about moving forward here. But you do mention that body of work that you've accumulated here, and that kind of as a segue, all things kind of put together here across your run on the main roster and NXT as well, just kind of across the board. Is there any one, or I'll give you maybe even two matches that you'd kind of point to as the best example or examples of, I should say, who you think like kind of represents who you are as a performer, and or who you want to be going forward?
I remember we did a tag match to kind of reference to the questions. I got kind of two different ways of answering this. When we were doing comedy matches with Breeze, we were at the Usos at the Backlash pay-per-view in 2017, which I showed up to the arena in Chicago, and I had all these ideas of this, Rock and Roll Express great tag team match. And we went in, spoke with Vince, and he's like, I want you guys to go out there in costumes. And, we walked Breeze out. He's like, I want you to come out and wear those outfits you guys have been wearing in your interviews, and we're like, all right, yeah, sounds great. And I remember leaving the office, and I'm like, I look at Breeze, I go, he's ribbing us. And then, so he wanted us to dress up in costumes. So we went out there, we did the whole deal, and Breeze dressed up, and they loved it. It was something different. And whereas we came through Gorilla coming back, I'm like, he's a G, he knows what he's, he knows there's a reason why he is who he is, because he knows what the fuck he's talking about. So we were proud of that, because we kind of took a weird situation and just a unique formula of a match and kind of hit a home run with it. Luckily we were in Chicago, and they're awesome out there, the crowd. But So that was kind of a proud comedy moment for us. And I guess winning the tag titles for Breeze and I, just for all the ups and downs we went through, obviously me being an old grizzled piece of shit that, edit that out. Um, being an old banged up worker, kind of overcoming all these injuries. As we get a little momentum, I'd get hurt. And then Breeze, kind of dealing with the frustrations of, just being a singles wrestler, waiting for me to come back, and then me coming back finally and getting a little momentum. And then we won the tag titles down there. And just, Hunter and Sean and Road Dogg and everybody down there kind of putting some faith in us, as kind of two older guys to work with the young guys. And it meant a lot to us, so I guess that's my serious wrestling favorite moment, I guess.
I think that makes perfect sense. Obviously, kind of reaching the pinnacle of success there. So now moving forward, I know that you're getting ready here to really kind of re-enter the wrestling world once again. I saw that you have been announced for Wrestle Pro. You're facing Brian Myers.
Yeah.
So that's a very fun matchup there.
Yeah.
But then kind of using that, what are your thoughts on facing Brian, a guy that obviously you used to work with in WWE, and then kind of the springboard off of that, that will be, I think, for a lot of people, probably the first time they've seen you since your WWE release. So like that makes me want to question, how do you want to be presented as a character going forward now that you may not be so pigeonholed in that comedy role? Like, what are you kind of cooking up here?
Well, I'm not going to give away all my secrets.
I know. I just think it's a little teaser.
I've been really every day since the end of June, just kind of thinking about. Steve Kern always taught us, like, take yourself out of the ring and put yourself in the crowd, and then look at yourself and like, how would you like who you're pretending to be, So like, kind of the analogy of just like, would you like this guy, would you like this character? So I played this character in NXT when it kind of transitioned from NXT season 4 into Redemption. I don't know if you remember that show. It was kind of, I think it was on AM radio or something, but it was fun because we weren't overproduced. They didn't really care a lot about the show. I think they had an overseas TV deal. So they're just like, they just needed content. So we could just cut promos and we weren't handed scripts where we have to read each line verbatim. So a guy like me that can't remember lines, that was great. So I could just go out and ad lib. And I kind of came up with this creepy, like dirtbag character, Johnny Curtis. And it's kind of, characters in wrestling have to be a little bit of yourself, I think, times like 10 or 100 or whatever, so I have zero ballroom dancer in me, so me trying to translate that character it's hard, it's not me,
right.
But I could pull it off a little bit, so I think for people to really invest in a character like John Moxley, that's John, that's him, but he's turning that shit up, and same with a bunch of guys out there. So I think being able to play kind of myself times a little bit more. I guess I'm saying I'm a dirtbag, but or kind of a little bit more myself. I think it's more comfortable than going out there and shaking your ass around. So, and it's just tough, man. When you can play that good comedy role, they want that on the show, so they're gonna keep kind of putting you in that role, So like, there's a reason why R-Truth's been on TV since like the 90s, because he does a good job at it, what they want him to do. But unfortunately, like for me, it's like you kind of get pigeonholed into that role, and it's hard to get out of that because people look at you and you're the dancer guy, or you're the juggling guy, or whatever, like you're just kind of the clown of the show. But so that I guess that's kind of going back to your question. That's why I'm excited. Hey, my dogs are nuts. Yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of getting out there and working with some of my old friends, which is exciting, like Myers and Cardona and a bunch of the other guys are taking bookings like Heath, and so just getting back on the road with the guys that I used to travel with, and just character developing, coming up with my own promos and kind of the things that I want to do. And, I think that's the biggest thing is you're in charge of your own career in terms of being back on the indies. So you can come up with your own shtick, and if it doesn't work out, it's kind of on you, you don't have the machine behind you pushing you. So you can succeed on your own or fail on your own. It's up to you. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I imagine it's a very exciting time. You mentioned Matt Cardona. I'm a big fan of his myself, and I guess that kind of leads me to a question that now here you are, you have this freedom. I know you're, as I said, you're facing Brian Myers at WrestlePro, but obviously the answer question I think is that when you look to kind of what's next, do you kind of see yourself doing more kind of bouncing around, get shows like WrestlePro and others? Do you think you might kind of eventually work your way to an impact where you could work more with a Matt Cardona or even AEW, like, or is one of those a goal, or is more just kind of to explore a little more freely?
My goal when I first started wrestling in 1999 was to wrestle for the WWF, WWE, and to wrestle in Japan. So, and the ECWA Super 8, but I don't even know if that's around anymore. But
I'm pretty sure it is.
Is there still Super 8?
I thought so. I thought so.
Well, fuck, maybe I can get on that too. But I'd like to go to Japan before I'm too old. And then I've been under contract for 14 years, so I've only been able to wrestle for one place. The last independent match I had was in like 2006 when I was down in Deep South Wrestling. So just the freedom of being able to travel around, taking my girl with me on the road, going to Alaska to wrestle for Kevin, just being able to bounce around. At this stage in the game, it's not necessarily just about the money. It's about the freedom to be able to go out and create and cut promos, come up with characters. It's like being a comedian on the road. You can go to these smaller nightclubs and try out your shtick, and if it's not working, then you can adjust it, and then eventually maybe go to NWA or TNA or AEW when you're kind of more polished with your character. But right now, for the foreseeable future, it's definitely just definitely don't sign anywhere and just go out and just travel and have some fun and see my old friends and bullshit. So
yeah, obviously makes a ton of sense. And I guess lastly here, you mentioned that freedom and exploring. You mentioned potentially working with some of those friends, but maybe kind of beyond that, is there anybody that comes to mind that you'd want to face in that process of exploring and honing your craft and character?
Yeah, I'm intrigued with a few different guys. Obviously Moxley. I'm a big fan of his. I like the way he makes people believe who he is in wrestling, which I think it's not hard to do nowadays, but he commits to his character. There's a couple other guys, Cardona, which man, that kid, he loves the business, and you can just see how much he invests his time, and he puts a lot of thought into what he does, which I like. The last wrestling, like the show he was on with GCW, was like the first wrestling show that I bought in years. Next to I bought 2 wrestling shows in like the last 20 years. One of them was Gallows Backyard Wrestling thing, whatever the fuck that was,
right.
Which was awesome. And then the second one was Cardona's match. And he did such a good job of playing the heel, man. Like it reminded me of an old Memphis match, where he played. A lot of guys are booked as heels, but they'll go out and do a bunch of cool moves, and they don't want to show ass. And they're just really kick-ass heels, which are baby faces. So him to go out there and play a coward, an Andy Kaufman type of guy who's going into someone else's environment, into a different. He's like a Red Sox player going into Yankee Stadium and just totally playing his character to a T. That made me excited about going to work on the indies, just seeing that, because people are companies are drawing really good houses right now, and fans are really invested because they haven't been able to go to shows in a year plus.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's cool to see Matt just doing really well outside of WWE, because I know he loved being at WWE. And that was his obviously dream job, but sometimes, man, it's just you think your whole life and your whole career has to be WWE, but it's at the end of the day, it's wrestling. So
yeah,
it's good to see guys step away. It's good to see guys step away from there and still be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, I myself, many other fans are looking forward to seeing you, return and hit the ground running and explore. And as I said, and as you were talking about honing your craft and perfecting your character here. So it's definitely gonna be a very exciting time moving forward. And I wish you nothing but the very best. And I definitely appreciate your time today.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate it, bro.